Hello to everyone out there in listeners land. This is the Not So Common Sense podcast, the home of thinking often and questioning everything. I am your host, Marquita B. Critical thinkers, let's get into it. Hello again, and thank you so much for joining the Not So Common Sense podcast. I know I've been on a little bit of a hiatus, a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes, and the holidays, of course, so I know that is no excuse, but I am back. I am ready to end 2021 off with hopefully some good topics, and then I look forward to bringing in some good topics into 2022, the new year. So again, my apologies, but thank you all for listening, and let's get right into it. I've been hearing a whole lot of conversation regarding the Charlamagne and Kamala Harris interview that was done a couple weeks ago. And I just wanted to go ahead and give my 2 cents on the topic because I've heard just a lot of opposing views, and I've thought thus far that it's been very interesting. So I figured, why not just throw my opinion in the ring and just see what happens. So I'm just going to touch on some of the points that the interview was maybe about 20 minutes long. It was on Comedy Central. I'm just going to go ahead and hit on some of the points that were discussed that had me just raising an eyebrow or internally asking questions. And first off, I guess I should start by saying I used to be a fan. Well, I'm not going to say a fan. I used to watch like The Breakfast Club. I mean, that's the only place that I know Charlamagne from. I used to watch, but after a while, I honestly just got fed up with the content, the pandering. Yeah, I just kind of got over it, and I internally like just stopped listening to The Breakfast Club. Charlamagne now, I believe, he has his own show, and that's the show on Comedy Central in which he interviewed Kamala Harris. But I really just don't have any dealings. I don't, agree with a lot of what they say thus far. Thus, I don't want to give them any, likes or any additional views. So I just don't watch the show. And of course, this interview, in my opinion, was no different than what I'm used to seeing him do on the actual Breakfast Club, with a slight caveat. But for the most part, what he did in this interview was very similar to what he and the rest of the Breakfast Club staff tend to do, in my opinion. And so, like I said, I feel as though he tends to pander to elites, more so the non-black elites. I feel as though he, is always riding in their corner, that sort of thing. I think that just from the Breakfast Club perspective, because like I said, aside from watching this interview that he did on his own news show, I only have the Breakfast Club to use as reference. But I feel as though they tend to miseducate black people. They go soft on people who come on their show with a similar viewpoint or opinion. But folks who have an opposing opinion, they bombard with questions, and they almost become like real journalists when people that they don't agree with are on their show. So I just find that interesting because I think if you're going to go hard on both sides. There's no need in all the pandering and talking about irrelevant things like hot sauce and making collard greens when someone agrees with your opinion, but then trying to get real hard facts about platform specific issues or and I'm talking specific to politics. When folks have an opposing view, they really go in, or he really goes in with wanting information on what someone is going to do for black people. But when it comes to people who he just agrees with, those questions don't get asked. Again, this is my opinion. That is what I tend to see. So that's just a little bit of the philosophy on my feelings toward Charlamagne, The Breakfast Club, all of the above. But anywho, going into the interview, I will say the interview started off with Charlamagne, mentioning or discussing how he was motivated to vote for Kamala. And since he was motivated to vote for her, he's felt some type of way because he feels as though maybe she's disappeared or been silenced. Now, before I get into Kamala's response to that first question about her being, disappearing or being silenced, I want to mention how perplexed I was that Charlamagne used the word motivated to vote for her. Honestly, I had to stop the interview and replay it back to make sure that I heard him say what I heard him say. And yeah, he did. He said that he, as well as many others, were motivated to vote for her. I immediately asked the question, what motivation did you have to vote for her or Biden? Now, again, I like to use my critical thinking cap, and I hope you all critical thinkers out there will do the same. I trust that you will do the same. But the last I checked from doing my research on Biden, Harris, what they stood for, as I do with every candidate, regardless of what election it's for, you do your research before casting your ballot. But in this particular case, I mean, it was hard to gloss over the fact that Biden has been in the Senate for, I don't know, like 40 years. It's been a really long time. And he's had racist comments when he stood in front of several crowds and made it a point to call black people predators. I mean, he did this in the 94 crime bill push in his speech, trying to push that bill through. I mean, that's just one instance that pulled up. I also learned that Kamala Harris, her policies as Attorney General in California, jailed many black men for marijuana usage, which I find ironic because when she was asked about her own marijuana usage, she laughed it off. So I just find it interesting that we're talking about someone who seemingly, I'll say that, seemingly appears to have some racism towards black people, as well as Kamala Harris, who herself has not helped black people because so many have been jailed on her watch. So again, you can do your own research and you'll find a plethora of other things, but it was hard for me to gloss over that. So I couldn't understand the motivation. I also didn't hear much about their platform for what they were going to do for black people. So again, when he used the word motivation, that immediately triggered me to ask additional questions because I just didn't understand. Let me also bring back to the recollection of many of you how during the Breakfast Club interview prior to the election, when Joe Biden came on the Breakfast Club and he stated to the cast of the show, "You are not black if you don't vote for me." And Charlamagne and the rest of the crew said nothing, nor did they demand any information on a black agenda. I mean, I don't know what else to say. The proof is in the pudding. You can listen to the playback of that. I'm just going to let you all sit and ponder with that for a minute. But again, I ask, what exactly was the motivation to vote? But anyway, moving right along. Kamala responded to the question about, her disappearing or being silenced by saying, or by discussing about how proud she was of the work she's done with maternal health. Let me just say this. This lady spoke of maternal health, fibroids, lead pipes, excuse me, minority-owned businesses, and public transportation. Each of these areas I just mentioned were her response to disappearing or being silenced. She even actually mentioned that she was a bus rider. And maybe she was. I don't know. I'm not even going to dwell on that. But I just thought it was interesting, her response. And I need more information. Now, while each of these topics are obviously important, duh, we all care about the things that she mentioned. But my issue is just like Joe. When Joe Biden is asked the question, she failed to mention anything about a comprehensive black agenda. She consistently, in her response, used the term minority. And let's just be real. Minority no longer means black people. For those of you that don't know, minority in today's usage of the word tends to mean illegals. And let's just be real. Illegals whom Biden recently wanted to propose to receive $450,000 per illegal who came over here. Do your research. Minority also tends to mean LGBT and their rights. Minority, as of earlier this year, has meant Asians and their $50 million crime bill passage. Minority seems to mean any bills written for or in assistance of people who are not black is how I view it. I have yet to see any bill or any real program that is meant to deal with the continual oppression that Black people deal with on a regular basis. I've definitely seen others who have dealt with issues, other nationalities who have dealt with issues. They're getting their time. I don't want to say in the spotlight, but they are being recognized. And I have yet to see that happen for Black people. So I just find that interesting. Again, if you do a little bit more digging, you know, Biden did go to the NAACP and he basically let them know that Black people were no longer the minority and that Mexican immigrants were taking over. So, I mean that kind of sums it up again for me. I just find it very weird that she chose to use that term minority, and I mean I get why she did it because it is things for other Black and brown people. It wasn't specific to just Black people. So that's what again where a lot of my criticism comes from. But then moving right along, Charlamagne then asked if she feels the criticism she has received due to being a Black woman or a woman of color has been, you know, warranted. And I was happy that he added woman of color because we all know Kamala has never claimed being Black. I believe her dad is of Jamaican, is from Jamaica, and her mom is Indian. Even, you know, it's no surprise that when she attended Howard University, she stated on her application that she was Indian. Either way, she refrained from answering the question about whether or not she felt that her being targeted was because she was Black. She actually laughed it off, which I thought was another interesting point. So, you know, take it for what it is. I'm not really sure how you should take it, but apparently maybe she was afraid to answer the question. Possibly. I'll give her, you know, that one. But anyway, moving on to voting. Kamala made it a point to mention how voting rights are being messed with in Georgia and Texas. And I will say that from just the research I've done, Republicans in Texas specifically are asking for new ID requirements for mail-in voting, which will require a driver's license number or the last four of your social for voting purposes. A ban on drive-through voting, which makes sense to me. Enhanced poll watching protections. Again, that makes sense to me. Monthly citizen checks. Yeah, we want to make sure people who are voting are citizens. That makes sense to me. New rules for voter assistance. This is an interesting one considering states going back to the monthly citizen checks, excuse me, that's an interesting one just because states like New York just recently passed a bill allowing illegals to vote. Not sure if many of you knew that. The information's out there. Google it. You'll definitely find it. Yeah. That's an interesting one. I'll let you all ponder on that as well. But moving on, Texas also wants new regulations for early voting and a ban on mail-in unsolicited applications. So Kamala, I guess, has been making reference to the fact that these new voting legislations, you know, that are trying to be passed in various states would be disadvantages or just, yeah, they would not be fair to Black people. And I'm finding it odd. I'm not seeing how anything that I just mentioned would be disenfranchising to Black voters because we do have IDs, we do have social security numbers. I mean, a lot of us are citizens. Like, I'm not sure how the Black population would be disenfranchised by any of these things. But when any of you figure that out, please let me know. So, but that seems to be her issue. But again, moving on, because I really want to get to the crux of my issue with this interview. And that'll come later. But when asked about the $10,000 student loan debt relief that was promised to students, Kamala, instead of answering the question, discussed how she had to pull a coupon book out of her, she had to rip coupons out of a booklet when she paid her student loans back in the day. I'm not sure how that related to student loan borrowers now or the $10,000 relief that the administration promised. But I'm going to digress on that point because I have no idea why she went there. But again, moving on. The real meat of the interview was really the last 2 minutes of the 20-minute interview. And that's when Charlamagne asked if Joe Biden or Joe Manchin, which of them was the real president. And let me just tell you, the funk hit the fan for maybe, I don't know, 15, 20 seconds when he asked that question. I think in this very moment, she may have remembered, because it seems as though she's forgotten her Black heritage when it came to applications or mentioning that she was, you know, half Black, that she was biracial. But I think in this very moment, when that finger wagged and her head bobbed up and down, she remembered in that moment that she was Black. I can say that because I'm a Black woman and I know how we do. She definitely remembered in that moment. She did all of that finger wagging and head bobbing as she declared that Joe Biden was in fact the president. And then she restated her name and expressed that she was the vice president. And I'm sure you all have seen the viral clip because that's really been the talk of that whole interview. Immediately after she did all of those extra antics, she then regained her composure. It's like, oh, she remembered, I don't claim to be Black, so let me act like, like I normally am. And because she had a moment. Let me just be real. Please go look at the clip. She definitely had a moment. For it was about 15 seconds. She had a moment. But then she came to and remembered, oh, this is not how I'm supposed to act. Let me regain my composure. And she went back into her work with the child tax credit, reduction of child poverty, lead paint, the transit system, etc. I was rather confused that she shifted the conversation to that, because it was clear she certainly did not want to dwell at all on the real president question. But of course, instead of going back to what Charlamagne had initially asked, instead of him, redirecting back to what he asked her, since she seemed, since she got upset, she glazed over it and then moved on. Charlamagne, to me, in that moment, pandered to her once again. And he ended it all by saying, see what you just did there? That's the Kamala Harris I like to see. That didn't make it. It made no sense to me. So the Kamala he likes to see is a Kamala that gets upset about something and then redirects to something totally different that has nothing to do with the initial question. That's what I gather. I'm not really sure how. Yeah, it was all very confusing to me. And I had to watch it a couple times to make sure that I saw what I thought I saw and heard what I thought I heard. But yeah, I just found it interesting, and I felt like he immediately resumed back to his place as, I don't want to say no, I'm not even going to give it a name. I feel as though he resumed his place as panderer for the Democratic Party, in my opinion. Like I said earlier, his pandering really gets on my nerves. I will say this. The caveat that I mentioned earlier, I will give him credit for this one thing. He asked the question, who was the real president? That's the only thing I'll give him credit for with this whole interview. That's something that that's a question I don't think he would have ever asked on The Breakfast Club. And maybe it's because it's his own show. He has some additional leeway. I'm not sure, but I'm assuming that he has some additional discrepancy on the sort of questions he can ask. Because, like I said, I just don't think he would have ever mentioned that question on the show. But he let her off the hook way too quickly. So I'll give him credit for asking, but he let her off the hook. It shouldn't have happened that way. In addition, I'm also intrigued by what caused him to ask that question. There's not a lot of people who have his viewpoint that would even think to ask that question on a public stage. So I was surprised by that. I was intrigued. Normally, only, Republicans or people who are viewed as conspiracy theorists have made mention or have questioned whether Joe Biden is really president. So it made me think, well, does Charlamagne, the media, maybe just his show, have some additional information not yet released to the public? I don't know. I'm just trying to make sense of it. Or was it merely a ploy? Was that a staged question to make it look like he was being tough on her while really just pandering. I don't know, things that make you go, again, trying to put my critical thinking cap on and just trying to make sense of it. I don't have all the puzzle is very incomplete. So I don't know. I just found that very interesting. But anyway, after all of that ended, I will say that Kamala went into all the work that, her and the administration will continue to do. Which, to be honest, the things that Kamala had mentioned, I hadn't heard anything about. As of late, a lot of the news reports that have gone out about Kamala, several news outlets have reported how Kamala is not really trusted. First off, she has issues within the vice presidency with her, VP administration, where people, leaving, saying she's hard to work with, hard to deal with, all of that stuff. But also, it has been reported via seven news outlets that the Joe Biden administration doesn't trust her, and that all she's able to do is work in front of a computer answering emails. That's all that they trust her to do. So I don't know. You could take that for what it's worth. I don't work in there, so I don't know. But again, there are several inside sources that are reporting this. So I say all that to say that the interview was interesting. I think at the end of the day, I'm just going to take what was said with a grain of salt. I'm leaning towards this was a ploy question to make it look like he was being tough. Because like I said earlier, he tends to be lenient on people who agree with his view and tough on people who have an opposing view. But in this case, it seems like maybe he's on a different platform. He's on his own show. Maybe he's trying to send a different message. That's what I'm going with at this point until I see anything different. Either way, I think we as Black people have got to stay on the necks of those with platforms that claim to be the voice of Black people. I have also taken issue with this whole, people, celebrities, people with platforms thinking that they are the Black voice. I've taken issue with this for quite some time now. I have my own voice. Hopefully many of you out there have your own voice. I don't rely on people like Charlamagne, T.I., Don Lemon. I don't rely on any of these people for any views that I have. I do my own research with my intelligent mind. I critically think about what I've seen. I review various sources. And I do deep dives to get the information that I have. I don't just go based off of a headline that I see, because that's just pure ignorance. You can't do that. And I also take what I see on the media on a daily basis with a grain of salt. But I will say this, if you are someone who does tend to rely on these figureheads that claim to be a voice, whether you're Black or whatever, if the people that you like a singer and you, for whatever reason, decide to go with all of her views, my thing is you definitely have to do your own research. I think if you really get down to the nitty gritty, you will see that a lot of those people with platforms are either A, working directly with, or are in similar circles with those that they advocate for. So how much of, to me, you're going along with something that is not necessarily of your view, but it's just because you like the person, you're going along with it. And I think that's the easiest way to walk off of a cliff. But that just doesn't make any sense for me. I think it would be of disservice for you to do that, and that you should do your own research. Now, it's of no benefit for you being a hardworking member of society when your goal at the end of the day should be to get the truth and to support people who have a direct impact on your life or your needs. Be your own bad advocate, do your own research, and don't get suckered into the nonsense is really the moral of the story. Now, with that being said, I'm going to end all of this by saying I got really a whole lot of nothing out of that whole interview. Kamala did, step outside the box a little bit with her attitude. But again, the show ended with, you know, Charlamagne wishing her and her family well for the holidays. And she saying that, she wished his family well and that she wanted to see his babies. So, whatever. Now, what happened behind the scenes after that interview? If that was not a planned question, I don't know. But I'd be interested in seeing how the relationship with he and the Democratic Party evolves or does not continue after that question. Like I said, I'm almost convinced that this was a setup question, but we'll see. They seem to become way too chummy way too quickly afterwards. But neither here nor there. Just do your research, people. Do the real research. Ask, watch people who ask the real questions, which honestly is probably going to be very hard to do such. Because when you consider the folks that Kamala has in her camp, and I mean, Joe has his too, but Kamala has, I believe her name is Simone. And it was so funny just because when he, starts trying to ask the tough questions, Simone steps in with, we have to wrap this up. Or, she said several, can you hear me nows, as if Kamala couldn't hear the question. It's like, lady, get out of here. Let this lady answer these questions so we could see what the real answers are. That's the problem. You're so busy now. All the stuff that we don't care about, like how she's doing, has she disappeared or not? Like, no, she let all those questions go. But when it got to like the nitty gritty of who was really president, all of a sudden there's a technical a difficulty. And it's like, get out of here. This is a vice president. I'm pretty sure the testing 1-2 has been done a million times before she got on air with Charlamagne. But y'all believe what you want. I just thought it was crazy. In addition, I thought it was ironic that his show was on Comedy Central. So to have this particular interview on Comedy Central, that's a whole nother conversation. I hope you all have enjoyed this episode. This was just a really quick recap about the Kamala Harris and Charlamagne interview. That was really an interview with zero information. But if you have any comments, please let me know down below how you feel, or if you had any different takeaways from this whole conversation. I would definitely be interested in hearing. To me, it wasn't an interview. Real questions weren't answered. This was a conversation between, two associates that are, I guess one of which is maybe really more chummy than the other is, but whatever. That was his show. That was what he wanted to ask, or what he was allowed to ask. So it is what it is. Not a lot of info, but let me know. I'm definitely interested in knowing if you feel any different than how I feel about the interview, if your takeaways were different. If so, comment below, send an email. I'd be more than happy to read it and address it. So thank you for listening to the Not So Common Sense podcast. And I'll be back next time. Have a good one. Hey, critical thinkers. Thank you for listening to the Not So Common Sense podcast. Please help elevate this podcast by either liking, sharing, or subscribing based on your listening platform. Until next time, be blessed, think often, and question everything.